Once treated as a personal slave, she was freed by a human who then asked her to be his wife. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. The storm had been crawling across the mining valley for hours before Elias Varon realized the perimeter lights were failing one by one. The old generator behind the processing station groaned under the weight of the incoming sandstorm, its metal casing vibrating like a wounded animal. The digital thermometer on his wristpad flickered between warnings, temperature dropping fast as the wind pushed grains of red dust against the steel walls with a sharp hiss. Elias killed the outside alarms, grabbed his tool bag, and headed into the abandoned shaft where the signal interference had started. Down there, the air smelled like burned copper and stale oxygen, the kind that made his throat feel dry even under the respirator. The beam of his handheld light cut through the darkness, revealing broken rails, dangling wires, and an old cargo drone half buried in grit. He crouched to inspect the ruptured power conduit, until he heard it. Not metal. Not wind. A small, rhythmic pulse. Breathing. He followed the sound deeper, boots crunching on scattered debris, until the light landed on something that shouldn't have been there, a containment pod, half collapsed, its energy field flickering in thin, desperate sparks. Inside it, curled against the cold alloy floor, was a woman with silver skin dulled by dirt and bruising. Her wrists were encircled by thin restraint bands, glowing faintly blue. She didn't look up until his light passed over her face. Her eyes, bright, metallic, almost reflective, opened with a slow, frightened flutter. She tensed, back arching slightly even though pain made her tremble. "If you're here to take me back," she whispered, voice rough like she hadn't used it in days, "just do it. Don't pretend you're here to help." Elias froze. He'd seen workers abused by overseers, seen accidents covered up, seen greed sharpened into cruelty, but he had never seen anything like this. He knelt slowly, careful not to trigger the pod's unstable field. "I'm not here to take you anywhere," he said quietly. "I'm a maintenance engineer. That's all. I just came to fix a power problem." She stared at him, confused, as if the idea of someone speaking gently simply didn't make sense. The wind howled through a crack above them, showering both of them in dust. Elias shrugged off his thermal jacket and pushed it through the broken gap in the pod. "You're freezing." She flinched away at first, instinctively expecting the gesture to hide a command or a trap. When it didn't, when he simply held the jacket there without moving closer, her fingers reached out hesitantly and touched the fabric like she didn't believe it was real. "Why?" Her voice cracked. "Why would a human show kindness to property?" Elias felt something twist hard in his chest. "You're not property." He set his tool bag down, fingers brushing the cracked locking clamps on the pod. "And nobody deserves to be left like this." She watched him work, eyes following every cautious movement. Sparks danced as he overrode the first restraint. The collar at her throat pulsed dangerously, a warning pulse he recognized from slave control devices he'd seen smugglers use. One wrong touch could trigger it. One wrong sound could end her life. He swallowed. "This might hurt," he murmured, mostly to keep her calm, partly to steady his own hands. "But I'm getting you out." For a moment, she simply looked at him, really looked, like she was trying to understand a language she'd never heard before, one spoken in actions instead of commands. Above them, the storm roared louder, but down in that broken shaft, a different kind of tension filled the air. A human bending over a being everyone else had treated like an object. A slave watching a stranger choose to help her with no reward waiting. And for the first time since she'd been dragged to this planet, Celira allowed herself a single fragile thought: maybe, just maybe, freedom didn't have to be a myth. The containment pod's clamps gave way with a sharp metallic snap, loud enough to echo through the abandoned shaft and make Celira flinch like she expected a punishment to follow. Elias steadied the failing energy field with one hand, his wristpad flickering angry red warnings as he forced the override sequence into compliance. The faint blue glow around her wrist sputtered, then dissolved into a soft crackle of static. Her hands dropped into her lap, fingers trembling with the unfamiliar sensation of freedom. "You did it," she whispered, as if afraid the truth might vanish if she said it too loudly. Elias offered a small, tired smile beneath the dust coating his face. "Still need to get that collar off." The collar was older tech, a hybrid device with a thin explosive ring built into the inner rim and a neural disruptor threaded along the spine. Dangerous and crude. The kind of thing used by men who saw living beings as tools. He lifted his light closer and the metal reflected in Celira's silver eyes. For a second, something flickered there. Not hope. Not yet. More like confusion that someone would even try. "Hold still," Elias murmured. His fingers worked with slow precision, each movement careful enough to avoid triggering the failsafe sensors. Celira watched him the way a cornered creature watches an open cage door, not quite believing escape is real. She inhaled sharply as he reached the final node. This part might sting. A tiny pop sounded and the collar fell into his palm, dark scorch marks lining the inner ring where it had burned her. Celira lifted a shaking hand to her neck. No weight. No control spike. No ownership brand humming against her pulse. For the first time since she could remember, she felt her breath expand fully in her chest. Elias set the broken collar on the ground. "You are safe now." "Well, safer than before. We need to get out before the storm gets worse." As if summoned by his words, another violent gust hammered the outer structure, sending a shudder through the shaft and kicking dust into their faces. Celira tried to stand, but her legs buckled instantly. Elias caught her before she hit the floor. Her body was feather-light yet tense with exhaustion, each muscle fighting against years of conditioning that did not allow collapse. "I can walk," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Not right now, you cannot," he replied, scooping her up carefully. Celira stiffened at the unexpected gesture. No one had carried her with care before. She was used to being dragged, pulled, shoved, transported like freight. But Elias held her as if she mattered. As if she were a person. Her hands gripped the fabric of his thermal jacket still wrapped around her. It was warm from his body heat. Human warmth. A strange contrast to the cold metal life she knew. "Why are you helping me?" she asked again, her voice barely audible over the storm rattling the ceiling. Elias adjusted his grip as he made his way back toward the surface tunnels. "Because leaving you there would have been wrong." "That is not an answer," she whispered. He exhaled a small laugh despite the danger around them. "It is the truth." A distant rumble shook dust from the ceiling. Elias quickened his pace while the shaft lights flickered one by one, the failing generator above groaning under the pressure of the worsening weather. As they reached the main corridor, the reinforced door to the outside banged with each blast of wind. He set Celira down gently against the wall and keyed the diagnostic panel. "My rover is about 100 yards outside," he said. "Once the door cycles, we run." Celira stared at him, silver eyes sharpened by fear and wonder. "I did not think humans were capable of this." "Of what?" he asked, glancing back at her. "Compassion," she whispered. The storm howled again, shaking the steel frame. Elias extended his hand. "Stay close to me." She hesitated only a second before placing her hand in his. The contact startled them both. Her skin was cold. His was warm. Two worlds that were never meant to touch. And yet, in that collapsing mining corridor, their hands locked like it was the most natural thing in the universe. The reinforced door groaned as Elias forced the manual release, the old hydraulic straining against the brutal wind outside. Sand lashed through the widening gap, gritty and sharp, slipping under his collar as he shielded Celira with his body. The storm had grown worse, howling across the mining fields like a living thing. When the door finally slid open enough for them to slip through, Elias pulled her close and shouted over the roar, "Stay with me. Do not let go." She nodded, gripping his arm tightly. The world beyond the door was nothing but swirling red dust and cold air that bit straight through their lungs. Visibility barely stretched 10 feet. The outpost lights were completely drowned in the storm, leaving only the low hum of Elias's wrist pad to guide them. He lifted Celira into his arms again when her knees buckled against the wind. "I can walk," she insisted weakly, but her voice was lost in the storm. "Not in this," Elias replied, tightening his hold. Each step forward was a battle, sand pelting his face, boots slipping on shifting ground as he fought to keep them upright. Celira buried her face against his chest, the cold metal of her restraints clinking quietly against his jacket. She had been carried many times before, but always by someone who saw her as an object, never with care, never with urgency meant to save her life. The wind surged sideways with a violent gust. Elias staggered, knees dipping before he forced himself upright again. His lungs burned. His back screamed. But he did not slow down. Celira lifted her head just enough to see the faint outline of a vehicle through the storm. "Is that the rover?" Elias gasped. "Almost there." Another gust slammed into them. Celira felt Elias's grip slip as the storm tore at his arms, but he held her closer, jaw clenched, refusing to surrender even an inch. When they reached the rover, Elias slammed his hand on the side panel. The lock hissed open and he practically fell inside with her. The door sealed shut behind them, muting the storm to a distant roar. For a long moment, Elias remained on the floor of the cabin, arms braced around her, catching his breath. Celira stared at him, her voice trembling. "You risked your life out there." Elias looked up, sweat and dust streaking his face. "I was not going to leave you behind." Something changed in her expression then. A small fracture in the cold, fearful mask she had worn since he found her. An understanding of something she had never been offered before, a choice. Elias helped her into the passenger seat and started the rover. The engine sputtered, then came alive with a deep hum. The vehicle pushed through the storm slowly, sensors straining, tires crunching over the unstable ground. Celira watched him silently, studying the set of his jaw, the way his eyes narrowed with focus, the dirt on his hands from working the rusty machinery that freed her. No master had ever looked at her like that. Not with frustration or anger or entitlement, but with concern. With patience. With something dangerously close to humanity. "Elias," she said softly, testing his name for the first time. He glanced at her. "Yes. Back in the shaft, when you saw me, why did you not call the authorities?" "Someone like me, someone who was owned." Elias tightened his grip on the controls, guiding the rover through a narrow cut between two rock ridges. "Because you were hurt. Because someone put you in that pod and left you to die. And because you deserve better than that." Celira's breath caught, as if the word struck something tender inside her. "You speak as though I have worth." "You do," he said simply. "Everyone does." She looked down at her hands, still faintly marked where the restraints had burned her skin. The idea of having worth felt foreign, almost frightening. Outside, the storm began to thin as they reached a sheltered canyon. The red dust faded to a gentle haze, and the rover's sensors finally cleared. Elias exhaled in relief. "We will reach my workshop soon," he said. "It is not much, but it is safe." Celira looked at him again, a quiet intensity in her silver eyes. "I have never been safe before." His gaze met hers just long enough for her to feel something shift inside her chest. A human had done what her own people never had. He had given her freedom without expecting obedience. Without expecting anything. And as the rover rumbled deeper into the canyon, Celira realized something she had never allowed herself to believe. She was no longer alone. The storm finally loosened its grip on the canyon as Elias guided the rover toward a narrow opening between two slabs of weathered stone. The headlights illuminated a small outpost carved directly into the rock face, the metal door reinforced with layers of welding seams and old security plating he had installed himself. When the rover stopped, Celira looked at the simple shelter with a confused tilt of her head. "This is your home?" she asked softly, her fingers tightening around the thermal jacket still wrapped around her shoulders. Elias smiled faintly. "It is not much, but it keeps the storms out." He stepped out first, scanning the sky to make sure the storm was truly passing, then circled to her side and opened the door. Celira moved slowly, legs still unsteady, the cold of the night brushing her bare feet as they touched the ground. Without a word, Elias slid his arm beneath hers and supported her weight as they approached the door. The lock recognized him with a low beep, the old mechanism groaned open. Warm air washed over them, tinged with the scent of machine oil, heated metal, and something faintly herbal from the ration heater. Inside, the workshop was cramped but organized. Tools hung on the walls, a generator hummed in the back, and two small lamps cast a dim amber glow across stacked crates and a narrow cot. Celira looked around slowly, tracing every surface with her eyes. There was no cage. No chains. No surveillance node in the ceiling. Just a space made by human hands for living and surviving. Elias helped her to the cot, but she hesitated before sitting. "I do not know how to be here," she whispered. "There is no command. No rules. No punishment." Elias knelt so that he was eye level with her. "You do not need rules here. Just rest. You are safe." She lowered herself onto the cot with the stiffness of someone who had never been allowed to relax in her life. The mattress dipped gently under her weight, and she touched it with cautious curiosity. "It is soft," she murmured. He nodded. "Better than a containment pod floor, I hope." A small, fragile breath escaped her, almost a laugh, though she seemed startled by the sound herself. Elias stood and moved toward the cabinet where he kept medical supplies. Celira's eyes followed him with subtle tension. "You are not going to call anyone, are you?" He paused. "Call who?" "The ones who owned me," she said quietly, her shoulders curled inward as if bracing for disappointment. Elias shook his head immediately. "No one is coming for you. Not unless you want them to." She blinked, a slow, stunned motion. The idea seemed impossible. He returned to her side with a small medkit and sat beside her. "I need to clean these burns. It might sting." She held out her wrists, the skin raw where the restraints had dug in. He dabbed the antiseptic gently, and she winced but did not pull away. "Why are you doing this?" she asked again, voice trembling, not from fear but from the unfamiliarity of kindness. He looked at her hands, not wanting to make her uncomfortable. "Because nobody should be treated the way you were. But you gain nothing from this." He shrugged. "Maybe that is the point." Celira studied him. No human she had ever seen behaved this way. Humans who crossed paths with her former masters never interfered. They were too afraid or too greedy. Elias wrapped a clean bandage around her wrist. "There," he said softly. "The rest will heal with time." She touched the bandage as if feeling protection for the first time. Elias stood and turned to power up the small heater. The coils glowed red, spreading warmth through the cramped room. Celira drew her knees close to her chest, pulled the thermal jacket tighter, and watched him in silence. Not with suspicion anymore. With something quieter. Something wondering. Finally she asked, "Elias, what will happen to me now?" He paused, leaning on the heater's control panel. "Whatever you choose." The words landed like a shock in her chest. Choice. A word she had never been allowed to consider. She looked down at her hands, then at him. You mean? I decide. Yes, he said gently. You do. For a moment, she simply stared at him, her silver eyes reflecting the soft glow of the heater. She had been owned, commanded, and used her entire life. Now, sitting on a simple cot in a human's dusty workshop, she heard a truth that felt larger than the room itself. For the first time, she was not being told what she was. She was being asked who she wanted to be. The heater's low hum filled the workshop as night settled over the canyon, casting long shadows across the metal tools and rough stone walls. Celira sat on the edge of the cot, her silver eyes reflecting the warm glow of the coils, while Elias checked the generator for the third time. He was pretending to be busy, but the truth was he was giving her space to breathe, space to understand the terrifying newness of freedom. She watched him with a quiet focus, studying the way his hands moved, steady and patient, the way he muttered to himself when a bolt refused to tighten, the way he kept glancing toward her as if making sure she was still there, still safe. When he finally returned to her side, wiping dust from his palms, she straightened instinctively, a reflex carved into her bones. Elias noticed it, stopped a few feet away, and softened his voice. You do not have to sit at attention. This is not a command post. She lowered her gaze, embarrassed. It is difficult to unlearn. I know, he said gently. He pulled a crate closer and sat across from her, keeping enough distance that she would not feel cornered. If you want to talk, I am here. If you want silence, that is fine too. Celira hesitated, fingers curling into the blanket he had given her. She did want to speak, but the words felt heavy, sharp, like pieces of a life she had tried to forget. Elias, she began slowly, I remember the first time they put that collar on me. I remember the sound it made when they locked it. A click. Soft. Almost gentle. But I knew then that I would never decide anything again. Elias listened without interrupting, his expression steady, absorbing every word. Celira continued, her voice trembling. I was taken when I was very young. My people traded those with my abilities. Energy sensing, energy stabilizing. We were valuable, but not valued. She met his eyes, searching for disgust or pity. She found neither. You should hate me, she whispered. I was property of men who hurt others. They ordered me to drain energy from stolen tech. To stabilize weapons. To keep their ships running even when they broke laws. Elias leaned forward slightly, not touching her but anchoring her with his calm presence. None of that was your choice. Her breath hitched. But it was my hands. Your hands, he said softly, were used. That is not the same as choosing harm. She looked down at her palms, as if seeing them for the first time without restraints. A long silence settled between them, not cold or uncomfortable, but fragile, like a bridge forming plank by plank. Elias reached into the med kit again and slid a small piece of soft cloth toward her. Let me clean the burn marks on your neck, he said. Only if you are comfortable. The fact that he asked, that he waited, amazed her. She nodded, lifting her chin slightly. His touch was gentle, steady, nothing like the hands that had controlled her before. The salve cooled her skin, and for a moment she closed her eyes, letting herself feel something she had never felt, tenderness. Without motive. When he finished, she opened her eyes again. Elias, she said quietly, what will you do tomorrow? When the sun rises? He shrugged. Same thing I always do. Fix machines. Keep the generator from exploding. Try to make decent coffee. She tilted her head, puzzled by the simplicity. And what will you do with me? He answered immediately. Whatever you want. Her breath caught again at the freedom in his reply. If you wish to stay, he continued, you can. If you want to leave, I will help you find transport. If you want revenge, or justice, or peace, we will figure it out. We. The word felt foreign. Yes, he said. You and me. Together. If you want that. You are not alone anymore. Celira stared at him, the truth of his offer sinking into her chest like warmth spreading after years of cold. She was no longer an object to be moved, no longer a tool, no longer a shadow behind someone else's cruelty. She was a person sitting in a small human workshop on a remote canyon planet, and someone was finally asking her what she wanted. She whispered the word as if tasting it. Together. Elias nodded, unaware of how deeply that single word reshaped everything she believed she could be. Outside, the storm faded into a soft wind. Inside, something far more important began to settle inside Celira. For the first time in her life, she allowed herself to imagine a future. Morning light crept slowly into the canyon, slipping through the narrow slats of the workshop's ventilation grates and casting pale lines across the floor. Celira had barely slept, not out of fear this time, but because her mind refused to quiet. Freedom, choice, safety, these were concepts she had never been allowed to hold. When Elias stepped out of the back room, rubbing the sleep from his eyes and adjusting the sleeve of his worn work shirt, Celira was already awake, sitting upright with her knees drawn close, watching the sunlight crawl across the tools on the wall. "You did not sleep," he said gently. She shook her head. "I did not know if it was allowed." Elias paused, the simple statement hitting him like a blow. He crouched in front of her, voice soft but steady. "You do not need permission to sleep. You do not need permission for anything. Here." She nodded, though the truth of it clearly unsettled her. Elias rose and started the generator-powered kettle, the hum filling the workshop. "I need to check the solar array today," he said. "The storm probably knocked a few panels loose. You can stay here where it is warm." Celira stiffened. "Stay inside, alone." He realized too late what that sounded like to someone who had once been locked in rooms for disobedience. He shook his head quickly. "No. Not locked in. You can stay because you want to, not because you have to. Or," he said with a small smile, "you can come with me. It might be cold, but the canyon is beautiful after a storm." Something shifted in her eyes, a quiet flicker of curiosity. "I want to come," she said. The truth was simpler. She did not want to be away from the only person who had ever treated her as human. Elias helped her to her feet, careful to move slowly so she did not feel rushed. Her legs trembled, but she walked, each step a small act of reclaiming herself. Outside, the air was crisp, carrying the scent of wet stone and dust settled by the storm. The canyon walls glowed faintly red under the morning sun. Celira paused at the entrance, lifting her face to the light as if feeling it for the first time. "It is warm," she whispered. "I forgot what warm sunlight felt like." Elias led her along the uneven path to the solar panels, some tilted at odd angles from the wind. As he began tightening brackets and wiping away sand, Celira stood back, watching him work. His movements were confident, unhurried, efficient, yet something about them was soothing. She found herself stepping closer, drawn by the steady rhythm of his hands. "May I help?" she asked. Elias blinked, surprised. "If you want to." She reached toward a panel, placing her hand gently against the metal. It vibrated faintly, absorbing light. A strange sensation tingled across her palm. "It is alive," she murmured. "Not alive," Elias corrected, "but it carries energy." She closed her eyes, focusing. "Yes. I can feel it. The flow. Weak but steady." Elias watched her carefully. "Is that part of your ability?" She hesitated. Talking about her abilities usually ended in punishment. "I can sense energy patterns. And sometimes, stabilize them. Machines, power sources, even weapons." Elias nodded thoughtfully. "It sounds like a gift. Not something to be ashamed of." Her breath caught at the word gift. No one had ever called her abilities anything except property. She moved her hand slightly along the panel, and the loose connector sparked. Instinctively, she pressed her other hand against the frame and the spark fizzled out, the flow stabilizing. The monitor on Elias's wrist pad flashed green. "What did you just do?" he asked. She opened her eyes, confused. "I fixed it." "Does that not happen for you?" "Not without tools," he said, stunned. Celira looked uncertain, as if waiting for anger, suspicion, or fear. Instead, Elias smiled. "That is incredible." She blinked, unsure how to respond. "You are not afraid of what I can do?" "Why would I be?" he asked. "You just saved me hours of work." For a moment, she just stood there, breathing in the cold air, letting the warmth of his words settle inside her. Then she said something she had never said in her life. "Elias, could you teach me?" He raised an eyebrow. "Teach you what?" "To use my abilities without hurting anyone. To understand machines the way you do. To work. To build. To belong somewhere." Elias's expression softened completely. "If you want to learn, I will teach you everything I know." Celira looked at her hands, still faintly glowing from the stabilizing energy, and then back at him. "I want that," she whispered. "I want to become someone new." And for the first time, Elias saw not a frightened escaped captive, but a woman standing at the edge of her own becoming. The rest of the morning passed with quiet purpose as Elias showed Celira how to secure the solar brackets, how to test the voltage lines, and how to read the simple diagnostic panels attached to the array. She absorbed the information with an intensity that surprised him, her silver eyes tracking every movement of his hands as though memorizing each detail. When a panel flickered again, she steadied it instinctively, energy humming under her palms. Elias watched, amazed at how naturally she corrected the flow, almost as if she had been born for this kind of work rather than forced into servitude. By midday, the canyon winds calmed, and the sun glowed warm along the ridges. Elias packed his tools and nodded toward the workshop. "Lunch," he said with a tired smile. "You earned it." Celira hesitated, not because she was unsure, but because she was proud of what she had just done, a feeling she had never been allowed to experience. Inside the workshop, Elias reheated a sealed ration pack while Celira sat at the table, her fingers brushing the wooden surface with curious reverence. "You made this," she said softly, noting the uneven edges. "I did," Elias replied. "It was one of my first projects when I moved here. It is not perfect." "It does not need to be perfect," she murmured. "It is yours." The kettle hissed, steam curling up. Elias poured 2 mugs of weak coffee and set one in front of her. She eyed it with uncertainty. "It is bitter," he warned. "But it is warm." She took a careful sip, wincing slightly at the taste, then nodded. "Warm," she repeated. But the fragile peace that had wrapped the morning did not last. As Elias returned to the table, a sudden tremor passed beneath the ground, subtle but unmistakable, rattling one of the hanging tools. Celira stiffened instantly, every muscle in her body locking in place. "What was that?" she whispered. Elias grabbed his wrist pad, checking for seismic readings. Nothing. But the tremor had not been natural. It had been mechanical, rhythmic, controlled. A vibration he recognized from heavy engines. Engines that did not belong anywhere near this canyon. His expression darkened. "Celira," he said quietly, "listen to me. We might have company." Her breath faltered. "Company? Not the good kind." Elias moved to the door, switching the workshop lights to a dimmer setting. He peeked through a narrow slit in the reinforced panel. Down the canyon, dust plumes rose slowly in the air, too concentrated, too deliberate to be part of the weather. Celira's voice trembled. "They found me." The fear in her voice hit him like a blow. He turned immediately. "We do not know that. It could be surveyors or traders." "No," she whispered, shaking her head violently. My former master always sent scouts first. Their engines shake the ground like that. Elias did not argue. Her instincts had kept her alive before, he trusted them more than any sensor reading. Elias, she said, stepping toward him, I cannot let them hurt you. They will kill you if they see me here. He moved closer, lowering his voice. I am not letting anyone take you. You do not understand, she insisted, panic rising. I am not worth dying for. Elias reached out, resting his hands lightly on her shoulders, grounding her. Celira. Look at me. Slowly, she lifted her eyes. You are worth protecting. And you are not alone anymore. A low echo rolled through the canyon. Engines, closer now. Elias released her shoulders and moved toward the back of the workshop, grabbing a small emergency pack and shoving tools into it. We need to leave before they pinpoint our exact location, he said. Celira followed him, breathing unsteady, hands shaking. Where will we go? There is an old service tunnel that leads through the ridge. If we get far enough before they land, they will not find the entrance. She hesitated only a second before grabbing his arm. Elias, if they capture you because of me, they will not, he said firmly. I promise you that. The engines roared again, louder this time, shaking dust from the ceiling. Celira swallowed hard, fear and determination twisting together inside her chest. Elias opened the reinforced back hatch, revealing a narrow tunnel carved through the stone. He held out his hand to her. Stay with me. She took it, gripping tightly, her voice barely a whisper. I will. And as they fled into the dim passageway, the first shadows of the incoming ship slid across the canyon walls, signaling that the piece they had built together was about to be torn apart. The tunnel walls closed around them as Elias guided Celira deeper into the narrow passage, the faint glow of his wristpad casting shaky light over rough stone and dust. Behind them, the engines of the incoming ships rumbled like distant thunder, vibrating through the canyon and into the hollowed rock. Celira clutched his hand tightly, her breathing sharp and uneven, every sound triggering memories she had spent her life trying to forget. Elias, she whispered, they will not stop. My former master does not accept failure or disobedience. If he is here, he will tear this canyon apart to find me. Elias glanced back, voice low but steady. Then we make sure he never gets the chance. The passage narrowed to a crawlspace, and they moved carefully, Elias leading the way. The air grew colder, sharper, tinged with the metallic scent of old mineral deposits. As they emerged into a wider chamber, Elias stopped abruptly. Celira bumped into him, steadying herself with a hand on his back. What is wrong? She asked. Elias raised his wrist pad. Motion sensors. They are sweeping the canyon. We have minutes, maybe less. Celira felt panic rising again. If they scan the ridge, they will detect the heat signatures. Elias shook his head. Not if we go deeper. There is an old ventilation shaft that leads to a collapsed mineshaft. It is unstable, but safer than staying here. He led her through another passage, this one sloping downward steeply. The rumbling above grew louder. Celira's heart pounded as she imagined those ships, the ones she had ridden in as cargo, the ones she had been dragged out of by force, now descending for her once more. Elias, she said quietly, if they find us, you must leave me and run. He stopped so suddenly she almost collided with him again. He turned, eyes fierce in the dim light. I am not leaving you. You will die if you stay, she insisted desperately. They do not negotiate. They do not show mercy. They will kill you just for touching me. Elias took a step closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his breath on her face. Then let them come. I will not let you go back to that life. Her voice cracked. Why? Why risk everything for me? Elias hesitated, the truth rising to the surface with startling clarity. Because you deserve to live free. Because you deserve better than what they gave you. Because your life matters. Her breath faltered, her silver eyes widening as the word struck something deep inside her. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not in her entire existence. Before she could speak, a deafening boom echoed through the tunnels as the ships landed in the canyon, dust drifting down from the ceiling. A low, pulsing hum followed. Celira's eyes widened in recognition. Energy sweep, she whispered. They are trying to force me to react. Elias frowned. Force you? My ability, she said. They used it against me. They forced the energy in the ground to destabilize. It triggers my senses, makes me panic, makes it easier to track me. Elias grabbed her hand again. Then ignore it. You are stronger than they think. She shook her head, trembling. You do not understand. They train me like an instrument. When they activate the resonance frequency, it hurts. She winced as another humming pulse rippled through the stone, her knees nearly buckling. Elias steadied her with both hands, grounding her. Celira, he said firmly, look at me. She lifted her eyes, tears glistening. Listen to my voice. Not the resonance. Not the fear. Just me. She tried to focus. His hands on her arms. His steady breathing. The warmth radiating from him against the cold of the tunnel. Slowly, the panic receded enough for her to breathe again. Another pulse hit, stronger this time. Celira cried out, gripping his shirt, but Elias held her close. Stay with me, he whispered. They do not control you anymore. Something inside Celira shifted then, something that had been buried under years of fear and obedience. A spark. A strength. A truth she had never allowed herself to believe. Elias, she said, voice trembling, I remember something. My master used to call me an energy stabilizer, but that was not the whole truth. I was born into a line of protectors. My abilities, they were not meant for servitude. They were meant for shielding. For resisting. For breaking the control of others. Elias stared at her as realization dawned. Celira, what are you saying? She stepped back, placing her hand against the stone wall as the resonance pulsed again. But this time, she did not collapse. Instead, she inhaled slowly, her silver eyes glowing faintly. I am saying, she whispered, that I am not as powerless as they think. And for the first time, Elias saw the truth of the woman standing before him. Not a slave. Not property. But something far more dangerous to those who hunted her. Someone who was finally remembering who she truly was. The stone vibrated under Celira's palm as another resonance pulse rippled through the tunnels, but this time she did not collapse. She stood taller, shoulders squaring, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Elias watched her with a mix of awe and fear, not of her, but of what she might be forced to face. Celira, he said quietly, you do not have to do this. We can keep running. She shook her head, calm settling over her like a second skin. If we run, they will follow. They will hurt you. They will hurt anyone who shelters. Me. My master does not stop. Elias stepped closer, gripping her hand. You are not alone. She squeezed his fingers, the glow from her skin pulsing through the contact like steadying warmth. I know, she whispered. That single truth gave her strength. She moved toward the deeper section of the tunnel where the resonance pulses were strongest. Elias followed but kept a respectful distance, trusting her even though he did not understand everything she was capable of. Above them, engines roared as the ships repositioned. Dust rained from the ceiling. Celira closed her eyes and inhaled, letting the resonance hit her fully. It hurt, a deep ache in her bones, but beneath the pain was recognition. Her master's forces used her abilities for control, but they never understood them. They triggered only the surface levels, the instincts of panic. They never realized she had deeper layers, ones meant for shielding entire cities, ones meant for protecting life. Her voice steadied. Elias, I need to access the ridge chamber. The rock there amplifies energy. I can counter the resonance. Elias hesitated. The chamber is unstable. It could collapse. So could we, she replied softly. He nodded and led the way. Together they moved through the twisting tunnel until they reached a vast cavern where fractured minerals glittered in the low light. As another pulse rippled through the canyon, the crystals vibrated in response, sending shimmering waves across the walls. Celira stepped forward, lifting her hands. Her skin brightened, the glow spreading from her palms to her arms, then to her eyes. Elias stared, breath held, as she anchored her feet and allowed the frequency to build inside her. The next pulse struck, violent and sharp. She absorbed it, knees trembling but refusing to fall. A second pulse came, stronger. She absorbed that too. Then she exhaled, and the air trembled. The canyon shook with an echo that was not from the ships but from her, a counter-resonance rippling outward, pushing back against the invasive frequency. The engines above faltered. The pulse from the ships broke apart, scattering into harmless vibrations. Celira opened her eyes, their glow softening. It worked, she whispered. But the victory was short. A metallic screech echoed through the cavern entrance as armored figures descended the tunnel, weapons raised, light slicing through the dark. Celira stiffened. Elias, go. Not without you, he growled, stepping in front of her. The first soldier aimed. Elias braced himself. But Celira moved faster. She stepped around him, raising one hand. A soft, shimmering barrier expanded from her palm, a translucent wall of energy that curved through the cavern. The soldiers fired. The blast struck the barrier and dissolved like sparks falling into water. The soldiers froze, confused. Celira stepped forward, voice steady, almost regal. I am not yours anymore. The chamber pulsed with her words. Her glow brightened. The soldiers hesitated, weapons shaking. One of them dropped to his knees in recognition. Elias watched, stunned, as he finally understood the truth. She was not just from a line of protectors. She was one. A descendant of a lost guardian caste, believed extinct. A caste meant to defend, to shield, to stand firm against destruction. Her master had stolen her birthright. Now she was taking it back. The soldiers slowly lowered their weapons, the realization spreading among them that they were not facing property, but a rightful heir of a forgotten lineage. Celira lowered her hand, and the barrier dimmed. Elias approached her carefully. Celira, he whispered, what now? She turned to him, the glow easing from her eyes until only the faint shimmer of her skin remained. Now, she said softly, I choose my path. She stepped closer. And I choose you. Elias's breath caught. She reached up, placing her hand against his cheek. You freed me not with power, but with kindness. You gave me something no master ever could. Elias swallowed, emotion tightening his voice. What is that? A future. Silence settled in the cavern, warm and full, the kind that carried meaning deeper than words. She took his hands in hers. Elias, she said gently, if you ask me to stay. I will. He looked into her silver eyes, seeing not the frightened captive he found in a broken containment pod, but a woman who had risen into her true self. Celira, he said, voice steady despite the pounding of his heart, will you be my wife? Her breath trembled, a single tear slipping down her cheek, illuminated by the faint glow of her skin. She nodded once, slowly, reverently. Yes, she whispered. I will. And in the quiet that followed, with dust settling around them and the threat of her past fading into distant shadows, they stood together in a silence that was not empty at all, but full of promise. The galaxy was vast, dangerous, and cold. But in that moment, in that cavern of fractured light, one simple truth echoed like a vow. Humanity, in all its fragile goodness, had set her free.